Welcome to this day 2 of this facilitator training. We appreciate you taking your time to attend this. Kelly Robles is here, our executive director, as well as myself. We have a busier day today than we did yesterday. We appreciate your time listening to the presentations for exams for credit. All of you should have received an email from me that listed or had the presentations, PDFs of the presentations attached, plus a link for further information. And if you did not receive that, please let me know. Sometimes those things can go to spam. So let me know and I'll be sure to email it to you directly. I think that it was a great start to this facilitator training and provided some good insights on where the exam for credit companies would like to see this transfer go. Today, I'm going to share my screen and we can look at the agenda for today. We will be looking at our expectations for the 2022 to 2023 ATF season. We'll be going through some ATF meeting tips. We're going to talk through a few of the changes and upcoming things that we can anticipate in this coming season. And then, of course, we'll be wrapping up the day with a few final remarks. Okay, so I am going to jump right in the interest of time and go straight into our we've got one more coming in here. Let's see. I think I'm going to just live wildly and just kind of share my whole screen here. Okay, this did not do where I wanted it to go, so let me start over here. Okay. So we are now in the chat lines. This is where we do the majority of our work. And as you guys know, last year we revamped the chat lines. We reorganized them significantly. First of all, how did that work out? Does anybody have some feedback for us now that you've used this new organization for a year? Do you find that it is easier to navigate and use? Or do you have any feedback for me on this, just right off the top before we get into a little bit more detail?
This is Jenny Lee at CAC, and I liked it. I found it pretty easy to find what I was looking for whenever I was looking for it. And that actually was an improvement from the year before because I felt like it was easier to find things and get things done this past year. So
wonderful. That was the purpose. So I'm glad that it worked. If anybody has other feedback for me, please don't hesitate to email me, give me a call, whatever you need. Kelly, would you mind manning the waiting room? I hear it dinging, but I can't really see where they're coming from. Oh, I just saw it. So we got. But if you would man it from this point on, I would really appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to the chat lines, let's take a look at these two sections. I wanted to look at the preseason annual tasks first. And just talk through some of these due dates. As you remember, one of the critical points that we have you all do is go through and look at your review of the no program status. So review which disciplines for your institution are considered no program. And let me know if there are any changes to that. We set the parameters on the software at the top of the season, and it has to do with attendance. We have to make sure that this is set correctly. On the back of the season, which is we are right now, or getting ready to start a new season, we can make any changes you want to make. If you've had changes in your curriculum this summer, you anticipate that, and you anticipate having programs either come into existence or that you're retiring programs, please let me know if there's any changes to that. That I need to know by August 15th in order for us to set the parameters the way we need to set the parameters. Also, we're hoping that you'll go through and look at the membership database verification report and make sure that all of the members that you have in every discipline is up to date. cleaning that out, making that organized is really key to having a smoother start to your season and ensuring that you have the representation at the different ATF seasons that is necessary for your voice to be heard and for your data to get cleaned up online. How did that go last year? Does anybody have any input on the membership database verification that we kind of created for last year? Did that work okay? Was that a helpful tool? What feedback do you have for us on that? No feedback. So
let me jump in real quick, Stan, and just add one thing. Sometimes you'll notice an email where I will copy you into an email, or Sian will copy you into an email. If your faculty or staff reach out to us from your colleges asking to be added to a listserv, we include you, not because we just want to add more work to your schedule, but we want you to be aware of the changes that people are requesting. And you have the ownership over who from your institution gets to participate in certain groups. Maybe there was a reason somebody got removed from the listserv, or maybe there's a reason that somebody is the representative and not somebody else. We don't want to make those decisions for you, and we don't want to have to keep all of that in our mental bandwidth. And so if you see those, we'll usually say something like, each institution in our statewide groups manages their own membership. Patty is the person for Yavapai College. I've included her here so she can make the appropriate changes. Hopefully that's just a way for you to manage and keep track of that. And we know that sometimes changes happen very late in the summer or even early the first 1 or 2 weeks of the fall semester. We just don't want to be adding every single person to an ATF that requests being added to an ATF. That's really your prerogative.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelly. Also, of course, on the chat lines, we keep track of people who have requested electronically to join, who don't email us, but use the tabs on the dashboards in this ATF season task, join ATF requests. So keep an eye on that as well. But those will be pretty much the two ways that we'll know who gets added to this membership database verification. And then we also have the review AJAC data and the CEG course title not found verification. We know that this number 4 could be a heavy lift for your institution. And ideally, this would be taken care of before July 15th every year, but we know that there are several institutions who have not gone through this in a decade or more. And if it takes a little longer to clean this piece out, this is definitely something we understand. And then, of course, we have the ATF season tasks for the season facilitators in here. I think you're all very well aware of all of these due dates. We are going to pull out the ATF meeting report and talk about that a little bit later in this meeting. But are there any questions on any of these other season tasks as listed? For those of you who are new, we do have video, this video library. So in the facilitator corner, I want to draw your attention down here to number 8, video library. We do have video training for each of these season tasks and these preseason annual tasks. If this sounds a little bit foreign to you, feel free to take a look at that. And if you still have questions, let me know. But it should be pretty self-explanatory. One of the things I did want to cover is the number 1 in Facilitator Corner is the ATF virtual binders. This is how I think I kind of showed this to you yesterday. It looks like several of you, most of you actually, were able to go into the binder and click on your links and make sure that your Zoom links worked. I did receive feedback from a few of you that if things were just a little bit off in the binder, and I believe we've gotten those fixed now. If you have not had an opportunity to review your virtual binder, please do so and make sure that everything is organized as it should be, because what we have listed for you in the virtual binder, of course, is what helps you run the ATF season once we begin that. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add on this stuff? No? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on any of this so far? One thing I will mention is I noticed a little bug in the system that I pointed out to Rebecca, and that is that I found some instances in our programming where degree changes were requested. So they show up on the CCMs in red, but a file was not dropped into the approved matrix changing for the appropriate institution. So Rebecca has run a report for me to show me where all of those instances have occurred. And I am working on cleaning those out this summer to make sure that as we go into the ATF season, all the work that the ATFs did, including the degree request changes, are handled appropriately. If you happen to see any that stick around, if we miss them somehow, please email me and let me know so we can flush those all the way through the system before the ATF season starts. Rebecca is working on a fix for that. But if you happen to see some of those, that's what's going on. I'm actively working on reducing that report and handling all of those as one-offs. But I would appreciate your set of eyes because you guys are in those pages as much as I am. And so it'd be helpful if you could give me feedback on that as well. Okay, the next thing and the last thing I have in the section that I am working on you with this morning is the expectations of what to do if you can't attend a meeting. We have worked diligently to create this calendar, and there are several of you. An interesting thing happened this year, and that is that we made the decision to leave it up to the ATFs if they wanted to return to in-person ATF meetings this year, or if they wanted to go virtual. And what we found was about a half and half response. We found that about half of the ATFs decided they wanted to remain virtual, and half of them decided that they worked more effectively in a face-to-face format. And the interesting thing that happened is most of those meetings, most of those face-to-face meetings will be taking place in Maricopa County. But we do not have the facilitators in Maricopa County to handle that number of meetings. And so we extended an invitation, if you will, to some of our rural community facilitators from the rural schools to come in and facilitate those meetings. And they graciously accepted and were willing to do that. And we are really, I want to express a great deal of thanks because I know that you are going above and beyond. And making that drive in is a very gracious thing for you to do to help the system move along. In the meantime, many of the rest of you are doing virtual only meetings. And so you've had input. We've tried to build this schedule around you. If something happens that now, whatever something comes up as that happens, we request that you try and work with each other and trade within each other's schedule and plug, horse bartering, whatever, horse trading, whatever you want to call it. But we do expect you to be responsible for those meetings. And then loop us in and let us know, because I will need to change the host privileges for meetings. I will need to add extra hostage. We might even need to change Zoom links completely, depending on how they've been set up and kind of a little bit, we rely on, well, there are technological limitations that we have to work through. And we want to make changes to the virtual binder and that kind of thing. But we figure that everyone's had input. We feel pretty good about the schedule that's set right now. If something comes up, please alert us and find your own replacement. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add on that? Nope.
Just that we know that the ATF season can be fast and furious, and you guys are doing any combination of 1 to 5 individually, but CN is managing all 47 of them and the details. And some of those meetings, we have 8 on a given Friday. And so we understand that life happens and things happen, but it gets really chaotic very quickly to manage lots of different moving parts all at the same time. And so we really appreciate your patience and any extra consideration you can give. September, October, and the first part of November is just nose to the grindstone when it comes to ATF stuff. And you guys working together You know, there have been years in the past when we've been able to meet in person and we've created those relationships and connections with each other. And so we have a little bit more of that speed of trust working with each other. But once we get to know each other, hopefully, you know, through some Zoom stuff like this, but also in the future, you guys will know that you can rely on each other as a network of people, either within your own teams at your institution or your colleagues statewide. And we really appreciate your willingness to do that.
Great. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on these things, on the preseason annual tasks, on the ATF season tasks, facilitators corner, any of the things we're doing here, or on a reassignment, reallocation of ATF meetings? Anything? Okay, so I think we're ready then to move into these ATF meeting tips. And I'm going to pass it off to Kelly. We're moving at lightning speed, you guys. 40 minutes fast. If everybody goes along with everything, we could be out, let's see, it's 10:19 by 10:30. How would that be?
Now, I talk fast, Cian, but I don't know if I could say everything I want to say in 11 minutes. But we talked a bit yesterday about all of the resources that Cian has put together and brought together for each of you. And I strongly, strongly encourage you to do each of those things and go through them and familiarize yourself with the video library, with the virtual binder that she mentioned and showed, because when you get in, at least for me, when I get in front of a group of people, my brain doesn't always do all of the things that I thought it was going to do. And my hands don't always do the things, and I can't find my notes as fast as I thought I could. And so the more that you are familiar with each of those things, the more that you've tested your Zoom link, I recommend that you use the computer that you will be using for that meeting. If you're able to go into that room because it's on your campus, that you go in and you test all of those things ahead of time before you have people physically in that room that are also asking you about lunch, that are also asking you about the AJEC redesign, that are also asking you about something else that happened on your campus. Practice those things so that's not what rattles you. We did last year for the first time the statewide update that I recorded. We did it as a PowerPoint, similar to what we had done in the past, but rather than giving you a script to read, I just recorded that as a 19-minute YouTube video. And we will do that again, unless you all are wildly opposed to that and would prefer to do it yourself. That gives you some time to catch your breath and think and work through anything. If you're really adept, you can start to process some of the things or plan for other things in your meeting. But that gives you 19 minutes. It also gives your attendees, the faculty in your meeting, somebody else's voice to listen to for a little bit and break things up so that people don't get too disengaged. So we will be doing that. Both Cian and I have facilitated handfuls of meetings. We've been there. We know how awkward they can be. We've done them when they've gone really well. We've also done them when it seems like nothing could go right. We've had to, in the last 2 years, cancel meetings and postpone them for later dates because we just couldn't figure out how to support things, or facilitators weren't available, or something emergent happened at the last minute. We can plan for as many of those scenarios as possible. But here are some of the tips that I would recommend to make sure that you be successful. I don't have a PowerPoint. I don't have a little card to give you, but I'm just verbally going to tell you. So about a month before your ATF meeting, I will send out an email to the chair of the meeting. I will also send an email out to the host of the meeting. In most cases, those are different people. Some groups choose to have the chair and the host be the same person. But in both cases, I will CC you on the email as the meeting facilitator, and I will make that virtual introduction. That is just the beginning. Cian and I are hoping that that is the first step in the door, that you are working with the chair and the host to make sure that they are prepared and they have everything they need. We have in our handbook and policy manual chair duties, host duties, both of those are linked in the email that you will be copied on. It tells a chair exactly what to do. It tells a host exactly what to do. Some of the things that we ask the host to do is tell people where to park. That might be really easy if we're at Coconino Community College, because there's like one parking lot and it's open and it's pretty obvious where to park. But if it's at, Pima Community College, which of Pima's 6 campuses is Pima Community College? Where do we park at? Which building do we go in? Which room is it? CN has tried to solicit that information in much more detail now. So we have all of that in the chat lines and on the dashboard, but we ask that a host share that information and have those details available. If you are at a location that requires parking be paid for or parking be reimbursed, or there's a parking validation or a parking sticker, make sure that your host knows to share that information with attendees. Your host may also ask you how many people have RSVP'd. There is a way from the dashboard that you can view the RSVP. You can, I would show you right now, but it doesn't have any real data in it because nobody's RSVP'd for an ATF meeting now. But institutions are not required to provide lunch. They're not required to provide breakfast, but many institutions choose to do that and choose to host. We generally say for most ATFs, 20 to 25 is a good ballpark. But there are some ATF groups that are very large, and there are some ATF groups that are really small. I come from the camp of like, I don't ever want to run out of food. So I always have like 8 times too many, meals available for people. But I would rather do that than run short. If you have questions, if your host has questions about ordering food, if that's something that is too complicated or they don't have the budget for, please reach out to CN and I, and we can help support some of that. But it is not a requirement of ATFs. You could do a no host lunch where something is available, but people pay on their own. Just make sure that people know so that they can plan accordingly. Other things with the chair, you're going to want to let the chair know, especially if they're a new chair, that there is an agenda template. They don't just design the whole meeting and run the whole meeting like a department chair meeting or one of their own faculty senate meetings. We have things that we want them to talk through. All of that is linked in the virtual binder. All of that is linked and available on the dashboard as well. You're going to want to talk through which things you're going to do, which things they're going to do, what they're comfortable talking about. Some of our chairs, I think, the physics chair from Maricopa has been the physics chair for like 8-9 years. The languages chair has been the languages chair for like 5 or 6 years. They know what they're doing. They know their preferences and what they want to do, and you can work with them in whatever way you feel comfortable. There are also a handful of people that this is their first time chairing. They've never done this before. They have no concept for what an ATF meeting is other than their own faculty meetings at their institution. And so please support them or direct them to those links for the chair meetings. Now, these might be personal differences. Me personally, Kelly Robles, if I were facilitating a physical meeting, I would want to be there at least 45 minutes in advance. I would want to make sure I knew where I was going, and I probably have a lot of undiagnosed anxiety because I just want to make sure that when I get there, the room is unlocked, the lights are on, the tables and chairs are in a configuration that I want them to be. If your host has made signage, that the signage points people to the right place. If not, you may want to create signage yourself or work that out with the host, signage from the parking lot or signage in the building telling people ATF meeting this way and an arrow. Some of us are pretty adept at navigating places internally and figuring out where we need to go. But if we remember, we're coming from all over the state and people don't necessarily know where they're going. So signage is a good thing to have. I like to be there. I like to make sure that if I'm using the room's computer, that I can log into the room's computer, or if I'm bringing my own computer, that I have all the connections that I need there. If I can't log into the computer, that I have access to somebody to do that. Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will, or anything will take a a long time, a lot longer than you think. You know, you call down to IT, it takes them 10, 15 minutes to get down there. I don't like being in a hurry and I don't like being rushed. So I like to make sure I have plenty of time to get there. You will also usually pretty reliably have one faculty member that shows up like 30 minutes before the meeting and wants to talk to you so much about women's studies that you just don't have time to do anything else. And so just make sure that you are either prepared with a really good something to distract them to get your work done. Some other things that you physically want to bring with you if you're a tangible resource kind of person. I still carry a writing notebook. Like I carry physical stuff with me. I like to write down notes. Even if you aren't a physical person, you may want to consider printing off a sign-in sheet that people can write on or sign into that can be passed around or can be left at the front of the room if you are hosting a physical meeting. You can also record that electronically, but then you're asking everybody how to spell their names, which institution they're at. You're making sure that you're writing it down correctly. One thing that's really easy to do is to just print off the RSVP list and let people check off their names, or you check their names off for them. We do ask that you do record attendance, not just by institution, but by person's name. We do report attendance by institution, but it is also helpful for us to know specific people's names, especially when it comes to chair and host for the future meetings. If you just tell us that Cochise College will be hosting next year and Cochise College will be chairing next year, we're going to assume it was the person that RSVP'd for the meeting. But we're not going to necessarily know if that's the right person. Each institution may have their own protocol for who gets to chair a meeting or who gets to host a meeting. Some ATFs rotate. One year it's a university person, the next year it's a community college person. They go in alphabetical order. If your ATF doesn't have a preference for that, it's just the luck of the draw. So that's sign-in sheets. We've spent a bit of time talking about note takers. We do ask that either you can record a meeting if it's a virtual meeting, but even if the meeting is recorded, we do ask that there is some written record of the meeting. The transcription that comes through from Zoom is literally every single word that is said in the meeting, and it reads like a script. And that's really hard for us to muddle through for 47 different meetings. And so we do ask that you not be the note taker, but that you find somebody in the room to be a note taker. And you get that person's contact information ahead of time or at the very beginning of the meeting, and you get their email so you can follow up, or you ask them to send you the notes before the meeting adjourns so that you can have those meetings. Cian's talked a little bit about meeting reports and getting those in within 14 days of the meeting ending. And a lot of times the delay is waiting for the meeting notes from your note taker or from whichever faculty member there. So that's really about getting started. We have a handful of you on today that have facilitated meetings for years. What other tips do you have, or what other things, not worst case scenario things, but like, what are some real things that have happened to you in a meeting that you weren't prepared for, or that caught you off guard, or that you were prepared for and you were glad? I've seen the gamut of things, even myself in all my years. Like, campus was actually closed. Nobody was there. It was a meeting on a Saturday and we were all sitting out in the parking lot, and there was no way to find anybody to come open the building at Central Arizona College's Superstition Mountain campus on a Saturday. I don't actually remember what the solution was. I just remember sitting in a parking lot having no idea what I was supposed to do. We eventually got in the building. I don't remember how, but that was one that I was not expecting. Other people?
This is Jenny Lee from Central Arizona College, and one tip that I was given a few years ago was if you don't get a note taker right away, just just tell them you're going to wait until somebody volunteers and just sit there silently, because eventually somebody will give in. And I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it's worked for me every time.
Yeah. It is an awkward silence. And Jenny Lee, you're totally right. I think people think they have to be like a court stenographer and record every single thing, like meeting minutes. And there's a lot of the meeting that does not have to be recorded. I tell people usually actionable items, records of votes, attendance, if there are major discussion points, if there are requests from the ATF that AZTransfer does, those are the things that we want to record, but not every single discussion item.
It also occurs, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you, aren't I? It just also occurs to me that if you make sure everybody looks at the minutes from last year, they might have an idea that, it doesn't have to be that specific and detailed. So anyway.
We tell the group that as facilitators, we're not permitted to take notes. I'm not sure if that's really true or not, but
I do not permit you to take notes.
And
I
that way,
executively direct you not to take notes.
Because they kind of look to us like, well, why aren't you taking notes? So we'll just say we're not, as facilitators, we're not permitted. It has to be somebody from your group.
Yeah. And I think, Patty, one, I'm happy to support that and say, yes, facilitators should not be taking notes, but two, it does give them ownership, and they know all of the jargon for their discipline. They know the specifics. They can rattle off numbers and names much more quickly than you can. And that is part of the curriculum and the process that they will need to take ownership over. Agreed. Others.
I was going to add, to the point of like notes from the previous years, there's nothing more frustrating for faculty who have asked for something year over year and then nothing happened to it, or it doesn't look like anything happened to it. I think really trying to review those notes and then make note of anything to say, okay, it looks like this, was submitted and it wasn't reviewed or something like that, and like make sure that that's up front with them instead of waiting, because I've been part of those and they're like, we talked about this before, and I'm like, I don't know, I wasn't there. But if I'm at least prepared enough, then that report really helps me kind of just get ahead of it before it becomes like a situation of somebody being like, well, we talked about this, we didn't do this, or we did whatever. Really helps out.
That's a great tip, Tanea. And one of the things that we do recommend is, because we now assign all of your ATF meetings ahead of time. 5 or 6 years ago, you would come to this retreat and then choose your ATF meetings. But now we give you almost 2 months to prepare in advance for your ATF meeting and get to know that information. I would strongly, strongly encourage you this week, before the end of the week, to log into the dashboards for your ATFs, to just read through those meeting reports and see if something stands out. CN and I do read through all of that together. We try to cover every single actionable item or request that ATFs have, or we try to follow up with them and at least let them know that a request they have is not something we're able to do. Because sometimes it's not clear to them, if we didn't do something, is it because we didn't see it, or because that's not something that we're capable of completing? But it is, like Tanea said, in your best interest to read through that meeting report, to read through the meeting notes, and just see if there was a hot button item last time, or if it was something that they spent a lot of time talking about, and then just check and follow up online to see if that was done, or if there's anything else that needs to be resolved before the meeting so you can address that. That's a great idea.
Well, and this is Angie, but speaking of ATFs, that we kind of ran into that last year. It was the first time that we had ever facilitated the technology ATF. And I know we reached out to you, Kelly, in regards to that, because that one's a mess, and it looks like Alicia has it this year.
Yeah.
So just know when you read the notes for like 3 or 4 years back, like they've had the same issues every year, and we tried to help them with it this year and we weren't able to get anywhere with it. So sorry, Alicia.
We did. We really tried. We worked with Kelly. We got some direction. I went back to the people that were requesting either breaking off and starting a new ATF, or having a separate common course matrix. So just so you know, kind of the details, we were willing. I even I volunteered to meet with a subgroup over the spring, but nothing ever happened. So
Yeah.
they requested, we tried.
And I think, Angie and Patty, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is one of the biggest requests that we see from groups is either wanting to split or wanting to disestablish and feeling like there isn't follow-up, but the follow-up is theirs. The request to establish a new ATF, we have one for a community of interest right now from writing faculty. The English faculty want to propose a separate ATF for writing, for English composition, to be separate than just the English ATF. They've been working through that. They've established it as a community of interest or submitted a proposal at first. But when I tell folks, yeah, you can do that, they say like, oh, we thought you were going to do that for us. And we say, well, if it's that important to you, here's the process to establish a new matrix, or here's the process to establish a new ATF, or here's the process to do that. And in some cases, it's like they come to the ATF meeting, they kind of have tunnel vision with the ATF meeting. It's really important to them right now. And then we leave the ATF meeting, and then we're not going to think about it for another 11 months. CN and I do not expect that you are attached at the hip for the next 11 months with this ATF group. We expect you to do your due diligence and work with them on things. But even I think what Patty and Angie have done is going the extra mile. I mean, if you follow up with them and you reach out to them and they don't get back to you, it is not your responsibility to continue to pursue something that they are not invested in. But yeah, the technology ATF, if I remember correctly, it has things like aviation management and construction and some, technology classes. And it's just kind of the lowest common denominator of things. And then that doesn't really serve anybody. Family and consumer sciences is another one that's like that. Family and consumer sciences has wanted to do a fashion matrix and pull out fashion. We do have criteria. We do have processes and procedures for establishing new ATFs. And in some cases, that is a solution, but it does require work on the faculty's part. So.
Well, and just to jump in there, Kelly, at least this is my impression of working with them. Like, they weren't unwilling to take steps forward. I really feel like in their case, they need someone to kind of handhold them through the process, because it is complex and they don't do this every day.
Yeah.
So I do, I think when Patty and I reached out to you, our hope was to kind of have someone from AZTransfer kind of, and I think you might have to handhold a little bit with them, because it's complex, with how their matrix and stuff is set up. And I don't think it's right at all.
Yeah.
They have as their common courses.
Yeah. We can, and we do. And I definitely would. I spent about 3 hours on the phone with the writing faculty the other day, showing them how to submit their thing. And so I'm happy to do that and willing to do that. I'm just not willing to do it for them, but right. I'm willing to sit with them and have them work through that and answer all of their questions. So yes. So, Alicia, if that comes up again, or if you want to be proactive with the solution that you think that works, you can reach out to CNRI and we can go through that. And Elena did say in the comments, in the past 5-6 years, we have had 2 new ATFs established: ethnic studies and theater and film, or film and media studies, split from theater. And we do rely on the faculty to tell us the nuance and the difference. We are not experts in every single discipline, but when I sat through the proposal for theater and film to be split into theater, arts, and film and media studies, it really made sense, but I had never considered the difference between theater performance and film and media. And now it's very clear to me, but the same way that, I don't know the nuance between computer information systems and computer science, but those faculty know it very intimately. So that's a bit there. In terms of meeting wrap up, one thing that we would ask that you do is they can have discussions. They can discuss other things that are specific to their discipline, to their professional affiliation, to their institutions. But we do ask that the meeting be wrapped up with some very specific details for the next year, with as much detail as possible. Most ATF meetings will meet the same Friday of the same month, like the 3rd Friday of October. whatever that is, find that date, record that down, get people to agree which institution and which specific location. It's not enough anymore to say NAU. Well, is it NAU in Flagstaff? Is it NAU in Phoenix? Is it NAU's extended campus in Yuma? Or is it an entirely virtual meeting? Groups have the prerogative to pick which works best for them. And like I said, a specific person, first and last name. We ran into a situation this year where someone volunteered to be a chair and a host because it was that awkward silence. And then it turns out that their institution had protocol and procedure for who got to chair and host a meeting. And Sian and I think Sian, we probably spent 3 weeks unraveling that really fun thing because we started reaching out to a chair and a host, and it wasn't the person who was supposed to be the chair and the host. And they took those duties really, really seriously. We don't expect you to know every institution's process for chair and host, but usually it should be lead members. It should be voting members. It should be permanent members of the ATF group. You're not necessarily going to know if they're permanent or not. And we have operated meetings without chairs before. It's kind of awkward. And the group kind of gets a sense if they've done one meeting without a chair that they never need a chair. We can definitely operate a meeting without a host. So if nobody volunteers to host, we can move that meeting to a virtual format, and it can just be a virtual meeting and there is not a host. So that's pretty easy. What else, Sian? What other things might I be missing?
Question, Kelly.
Yes, Alicia.
So for a virtual meeting, do you still need us to assign a host, or can it be the same chair?
There's just, that can be a null value. So if it's a virtual meeting, we don't do anything to communicate with a host. So it can just be blank.
Okay.
The only thing that I would add is just to make sure that you've got representation at the meetings. There's some tips and tricks and tools in the chat lines to help you guys kind of manage that. I know that there's 43 meetings that I'm managing, and there's 43 meetings that you're managing, right? Because you're trying to make sure that you've got representation at the meetings that you have, the disciplines that you have programs for. And it can be cumbersome for you guys as you go through the no-show report in the chat lines that shows the meetings that you thought you were going to have someone attend, and then for whatever reason they didn't attend. And so my recommendation would just be stay on top of that. You old timers, you already know how to do that. But those of you that are just joining us, or this might be your second year, be on top of that. Because on the back end, not having someone at a meeting for a discipline that you have a program for, or that you have values in the different fields, is going to put a lot of extra work on in your bucket on the back end of the season. So if you need any tips on how to do that, reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of walk you through where that is in the chat lines and what those tools are. But that would be my biggest recommendation that I would add, I guess.
I have a tip.
Go ahead.
I have a tip.
Oh, good.
Know how, when you're running a virtual meeting, know how to put somebody in the waiting room or take them off the meeting. And I won't say what happened, but sometimes, somebody might forget to turn their camera off and you need them to go away for a little bit. So just know how to put them in the waiting room or take them off the meeting so they can log back in or something like that, because you just never know.
So do you guys know how to do that? So let me tell you how to do that. When you pull up participants, when you're the host and you pull up participants on the right side of the screen, you know where I'm talking about, right? So the right side of the screen lists everybody who's in the meeting. And there's going to be a little red icon. One is a microphone that gives you an idea of if they are muted or not. And then the other is a camera. And if you hover over that section, the button Ask to Mute comes up and More comes up with the down arrow. If you click on the down arrow, these are your options. Chat, Ask to Start Video, Pin, Make a Host, Make a Co-Host, Rename. You know what I'm talking about, where this is? Assign to type closed captions, allow to record local files, allow to pull multi-pin, and put in waiting room, or remove, or report.
And
So at the very bottom of that screen, you can put them in a waiting room, you can remove them, or you can report them. Go ahead, Kelly.
well, I was just going to say, Nicole asked if we could share your screen. Zoom won't let you share your Zoom screen, so we can't show you the Zoom functionality in a share screen in the actual Zoom meeting. But you can also right click on somebody's name on their 3 little ellipses in their screenshot. If you are the host. Right now, Sienna and I are the only meeting hosts, so you won't be able to see that. But when you host your own meeting, if you hover over my picture in the upper right-hand corner, the same way your corner has those 3 little ellipses, it gives you the ability, if you are the host, to remove someone, put someone in a waiting room, or to stop their video administratively. We're not talking about like if they've just fallen asleep or if they're playing solitaire on their computer. We have had multiple instances where faculty or meeting attendees have done things laying across their beds, getting up and walking around their houses, just, like doing things. And you're just like, I mean, even if it's like some guy that's like eating a sandwich and you're like, really? Like, I don't want to see the food in your mouth. I probably wouldn't remove them from the meeting, but I might turn off their video. It's your prerogative, but if it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's probably making other people feel uncomfortable. You don't have to police everything, but you can. My guess is most of the time people think their video is off and they don't realize that it's been toggled back on. I mean, I know one time I was like trying to get something out of my nose and then I look at the screen and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just picked my nose during a meeting and probably everyone was looking at me. I don't know if people really care about that, but like I thought, oh my gosh, when we've talked about this with our steering committee, so think like your vice president, your provost, they have said things like, oh, I was in a meeting and someone turned their video on and they had just gotten out of the shower and they were in a towel. Or I got into a meeting and somebody was sitting there smoking a cigarette. Or I was in a meeting and somebody's like yelling at their kids in the background and their kids aren't even dressed. I think that is the world we live in now with the pandemic and with things, because a lot of us are still at home or a lot of us work from home and those things happen. But if you know how to do that, it can just, you don't have to be panicked. One other tip, I probably helped 3 or 4 people last year. The best that I could, Cian also the best that she could. We are not Zoom experts. And we have no way of logging onto your computer to give you technical support with something with Zoom that happens. We have sat through lots and lots of Zoom meetings. We have managed lots of Zoom meetings. So we try to support you as best we can. But one thing I found out last year is if you don't close all of your Zoom windows out today, and then tomorrow you go to log into another Zoom meeting, you get in some weird Zoom black hole where you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, you can hear things, you can see things, and you don't know where your Zoom screen is. So I would strongly encourage you, if you are logging any component onto Zoom during your meeting, that you make sure all of your Zoom is closed out from before, and then you reopen a new one fresh to start your new meeting. I don't know how any of that works. I can't even pretend that I have any idea how any of it works. I have just found that when you have multiple Zoom windows open from multiple meetings, it does some weird wormhole thing where it tries to connect you to everything and nothing at the same time. And Sienna and I have no way of helping you once that meeting is started. What else?
I was going to add 2 things that just came to mind. First of all, Zoom upgrades and changes all the time. and I noticed a new feature on Zoom this year. It used to be when I sent meetings, I could only name one person host, and that means that only that person could open the meeting link, or I could, because I was the one that created the meeting. But there is now a new category called alternate host. And by the way, once the link is opened and someone is named a host, no one else can be named as host. So if, for example, Angie Poland and Patty were scheduled to do a meeting and we created the meetings around them, and now they're not going to do what Michael Broyles is from NPC, I would have to close down that link completely and create a new link for Michael Broyles to be the host of the chemistry meeting or whatever the meeting is. Now there is a new field called alternate host that is editable after the link is created. So theoretically, and I've done a little bit of testing and it looks very promising, I should be able to simply remove either Patty or Angie and add Michael as the co-host or as an alternate host. I'm hoping that is the case. This would only be a thing if for example, if Michael was going to share with someone else or trade meetings with someone else. It makes it so that I don't have to shut down the whole link. I can just create assign someone else to be an alternate host, and the link should still be good because the alternate host would then have the privileges to be able to open the link. If that ever happens, I would request that we have an opportunity to test it a little bit before we open it up and assume that's going to, I'm going to want to do a little bit of behind the scenes work, but it should be a great addition because we won't have to close out links and open completely new links. Because as you guys know, those links are already up on the dashboards, right? There's already some faculty that is grabbing the link and putting it in their calendar, and anything can happen between now and September, October, November. They're not going to go to the dashboard for the link. They're not going to go to an email for the link. They're going to go to their calendar for a link. And so I think we're going to be able to save those links if we have to change leadership or hosts on the thing. The other thing I was going to mention is I'm going to go ahead and do up a how to remove someone from a meeting. I just took some screenshots of this meeting just now. And though I can't record it, it will not be helpful to put in a video library. I will put together a PDF and I will send you this document so that you can use it as a resource as you move through your season. I think that might be very helpful. The consensus is that might be helpful. So
I have one other thing that I wanted to talk about meeting content, but I remembered one other nuanced thing about technology. Sometimes, so not all of us primarily use Zoom. Some of our institutions will use Google Meets or will use WebEx or will use any other types of technology. And sometimes a chair or a host will say, oh, I'm just going to set up my Google Meets instead and we can meet on Google Meets, or I'm going to do this WebEx instead. For the ATF meetings, we request, I suppose we require, but that they be done through Zoom because we can record all those meetings. We can have access to those meetings. CN can administratively manage all of them. We can log into each of those meetings and we need to be able to do that. So if a faculty says, I don't really know how to use Zoom, I just would rather use this instead, we need to, maintain the Zoom login. So really quick before a couple people have to jump off, I just want to touch really briefly on the AJEC redesign project that the steering committee is working on. If you've read your AZTransfer emails, the steering committee has been working through an AJEC redesign as a response to the Board of Regents universities changing their general studies. We have our steering committee retreat next week. And so we don't have official information to share yet about what that timeline and what that will be. But we will have those updates to you, and I will most likely share that in the statewide update as my recorded message. There is right now some different school of thought about the timeline that we have announced and the ability to complete it during that time. Half the group feels very strongly one way, half the group feels very strongly the other way. And so we are planning to have a very thoughtful and engaged discussion next week about what we are actually doing as a statewide group. Just like any other big thing, faculty are going to want to talk about this. In 2016 and 2017, they wanted to talk about HLC faculty credential guidelines. They've wanted to talk about Achieve 60 AZ. They are going to want to talk about AJEC redesign. We will most likely send out a PowerPoint of slides to you so that you can have some of the background information, but we are not going to put that burden and that responsibility on you to be able to answer any of those questions or to go through any of that in detail. What we're hoping to do is have a model that the steering committee members themselves should be the experts at their institution. And so if a faculty from, Coconino Community College or Arizona Western College is asking, we can say, you can go to your chief academic officer, you can go to your provost, you can go to your vice president for learning services, and they have the information for the questions that you have. Often if you get in a statewide group and a lot of people start talking, lots of different things get heard, lots of different things get said, lots of different ideas get misconstrued. We don't want to censor anybody's ability to talk through those things or work through those things, but we really hope if people have questions, concerns, solutions, great ideas, that they're also taking those back to their chief academic officers and their faculty senate and their campuses. And so we hope we will have more information to share with you before you have an ATF meeting. We just don't have it yet today. All right. Any other questions about AJEC redesign or things that might come up at ATF meetings that you want my blessing to? I mean, don't say, Kelly Robles told me I don't have to talk about that. I mean, that's never like a good conversational segue to something, but we should be able to point faculty back to their chief academic officers for answers and things about that. Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I think the first one will be really quick. Are we expected to record in-person meetings too, or try to find a way to do that?
Well, the expectation is that virtual should be an option even for an in-person meeting.
Okay.
What we know is that hybrid meetings really aren't great for the people that are attending online because we don't have microphones. Most rooms aren't wired that way. And so we do ask, if you are facilitating an in-person meeting, that you plan and prepare to have the Zoom component be available. But it's going to be really hard for that person to hear everything unless you're in a fully mediated room that have mics dropped from the ceilings or remote mics. It's going to be difficult. And so, yes, record the meeting through Zoom. It might be your computer or it might be the chair's computer, and you might have to repeat things or create a protocol where you ask the virtual attendees to type things in the chat. And then you periodically have someone read things from the chat for them. But yes, we would like to have even if it's a fully in-person meeting and nobody is planning on attending virtually, I would still plan on having Zoom because things change last minute. Somebody's going to be running out the door or their battery died in their car and they're going to want to do that. So we have published Zoom links for every single meeting, even the in-person meetings.
Okay. My second question is, so I was trained to do the ATF meetings only in an online format. I have never attended one in person. So do you have any tips on how to transfer those skills?
I think you are at an advantage. So having, I would say the virtual meeting is the technically more difficult of the two. I think the in-person will just be different in that people, Cian, jump in and help me here, but just, I think a virtual meeting is harder than an in-person meeting, but I'm trying to think through the lens of what would be the biggest differences. And I think it might just be like sensory overload, like just moving to an environment where you're around other people. People will be physically coming and going. There are different, hospitality type things, like where are the bathrooms? Where is the food? Where are the garbages? The technology when you're in a virtual environment is usually your own technology. But if you're hosting an in-person or facilitating an in-person meeting, you're walking into a room where it might not be your technology. And so I would just, like I said in the beginning, give yourself more time to familiarize yourself with that room, with that equipment. If it's not on your campus, I would recommend that you pair up with the facilitator whose campus it is and just say like, hey, Alicia, I'm going to be at NAU next week. If I have questions, who's the IT person that I reach out to, or where do I park for this building, or those types of things. That's the statewide network that we really hope we're preparing and providing you with. Is you may not know every single campus in the state, but all of us represent each other's institutions and can work together like a team. Sian, what else do you think about an in-person meeting would be a transition?
So I will add, I feel like in-person meetings are harder to run because you are having two separate meetings. You are still doing the virtual meeting, and then in addition to that, you have the in-person meeting. And so one of the recommendations I would get is assign someone in the room to watch the chat. So you're going to want to get there early. Kelly touched on it. Don't assume that you're going to understand the technology. I've gone into meeting rooms where you have to have passwords to log into their internet, and their IT person had to come down and open up phone lines. And, this is before we switched to Zoom. This is when we were doing Gorilla, whatever, and Adobe Connect and some older technology. So some of those things are going to get a little easier. But in order to run the meeting, and this is really important to understand, you have to be in your own ASU Right ID Zoom Pro account. So that's going to require you to have some kind of a login on their technology and equipment. You might consider bringing your laptop and connecting your laptop to their equipment and running the meeting from your laptop, because it already has your password, you're already in. But and then you can let the Zoom room or the meeting place, the meeting space that has a computer in it, you can let it be a passive attendee and you can run the meeting from your laptop. But you're going to have to figure out that technology if you're in a space that does not belong to you. And that could be very challenging. You're going to want to be able to work with their IT person to make that happen. Then once you get that up and running, my recommendation would be to have a faculty member that is in the room monitor the chat, because that gets very difficult to do, to monitor what's in the room, to monitor what's online, to monitor the chat. That's a lot of sensory overload. So hybrid meetings, I hate them. I'm going to say it. They are very, very difficult to do for a lot of what Kelly just said, because the technology isn't always there in the rooms, and the person, the people that are online can't necessarily hear what's going on. But we do need to record those meetings to standardize that. We understand that the recording might not be great. It might, but that's in itself is going to be data as well. It is not insurmountable. I feel like we are better off now than we've ever been before, because most of us are very familiar with virtual technology. It's very interesting, Michael, your question really caught me off guard, and I had to think about it for a second. I was like, oh my gosh, this is right. Most of these new facilitators have only done online meetings. I never even thought of the fact that there's a whole in-person component of this that you haven't been exposed to yet. But the good part of that means that all of your faculty is now very adept at technology, and that was not the case before the pandemic. That is not the case before we moved online. So some of those struggles that we had with hybrid meetings, I don't think we're going to have anymore, such as people not being able to connect in, not knowing they were supposed to look on the dashboard to find the Zoom link, doing a panic. How do I get in? You didn't send me the information I needed. They've been a lot better trained, and they have a lot more experience in that. But I think this will be a learning curve. So plan extra time in on the front end to make sure you can get all the technology up and running.
And I did think of one other thing that we used to specifically train on when we did in-person meetings almost exclusively. Again, it's kind of old school style, but I recommended that people print off copies of their Common Course matrices, of their affiliated CEG pages, of the dashboard pages, because when you physically have them, you can then use that to scratch something off, write something new. You don't have to go through your notes and say, in this column, history 243 should be history 244. You just wrote it on there. So then when you go to make your proposed matrix changes, you already have it in that format. And so I would recommend the dashboard page itself that lists all the prefixes, the affiliated degrees, screenshots of the Common Course matrix, the exam matrices. In some of those ways, you could pass those around the room and have faculty write in their own things. But having those physical papers allows you to leverage the people in the room and have those things that you can just walk around in the way that you couldn't do it online. What other questions do you have, Michael?
Yeah, I only have one more, and this is something I experienced last year, and I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, especially our kind of more tenured facilitators, but I had a chair who was used to doing things for years, but there were changes to the template that they're used to doing and then didn't inform me of until right before the meeting, so day of, and during the meeting also. So I don't think I handled it that well in terms of trying to improvise those changes. So do you have anyone have any advice in preparation for that possibility?
Other people may want to jump in here with their own personal experiences, but what we hope is that you schedule a phone time or even a Zoom time, even if it's 10, 15 minutes, to introduce yourself to that chair, so that the meeting itself isn't the first time you're working with that person. We have tried to prioritize meeting facilitators being at the campuses that are hosting the meetings because you're familiar with that physical location, but the host and the chair aren't always from the same institution. And so it is more likely that you will have a chair that is not from your college than you will have a host that's not from your college. But when I send you that email about a month before, that would be a great time to just be like, hey, I'm trying to think, Allison Landy, early childhood, I'm facilitating your meeting. Is there a time that we could meet up on Zoom or a phone call for 15 minutes? 15 minutes sounds a lot better than 30 minutes, and 30 minutes sounds a lot better than an hour. But, you know, it's just to touch base and to make sure that we're going in. And it would be helpful for you to know if it's a first-time chair or if it's a fifth-time chair. You can learn a lot from being on a phone call with a person. You know, what is their personality and their style? Are they really assertive? Are they going to want to take the lead, or are they looking to you to lead everything? Are they going to be more passive and timid? And so I would recommend doing that ahead of time, or asking the chair if they could show up 30 minutes before the meeting. It depends on their teaching schedule, but you don't want your first introduction to be at the very beginning of that meeting and they mispronounce your name and they just steamroll you the whole time. Elaine in the chat saying, I always send an email to reach out to the chair and host, and it helps. Elena mentioned earlier when we were talking about the printed out documents, when technology failed in an in-person meeting, I did end up using the documents that you guys had printed out. And Michael, I am confident that you did much better than you're critiquing yourself for in your own mind. Nobody really knows what we're prepared for or not. I mean, I guess there are some really obvious slights that people could make, but you know, for the most part, it's a good mix of faculty that also might be their first time attending an ATF meeting. It doesn't have to be perfect. I make mistakes all the time when I'm presenting or when I'm in front of a group. And if I just own it and don't let it rattle me and just say, man, I wish I would have planned for that. Or, oh, I left my notes at my table, you know, and you just try to roll with it the best that you can. People are going to understand that. Cool. Anybody else have tips about working with chairs or pivoting in the moment? What else, Michael?
That's it. Thank you. It wasn't Allison who I had that issue with. Allison, are really tight. So
I know. Well, and Allison was the only one. Like, I just thought of Allison because I knew she was at NPC, and I know she chairs the early childhood ATF. There are only a couple chairs whose names I could pull out of a hat, but
yeah, cool. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we've talked a bit about tips for meetings. Really, it is, do not wait until the last minute. Do not wait until the night before. We have 2, 3, in some cases 4 months before your ATF meetings. If you come to Sienna and I in the next month or two with things or coming up, we are much more likely to help you than if you call us panicked the morning of a meeting. We have our own meetings that we're usually at or busy doing, or we're helping lots of other people. If it becomes an urgent, emergent situation, we may or may not be available the morning of or the night before. And so anything that you can test out or work through that would help you in advance is going to just be to your advantage. We also know you're a human. We're trying to make this as easy as possible. We've talked through lots of different models, like maybe Sienna and I could facilitate every single meeting. Probably not possible. Maybe we could have every single ATF meeting in the same physical location and just rent out a conference center and make them all in one location so we could help everybody. Probably also not feasible. We've talked through lots of different models and lots of different ideas. We've talked about requiring ATF meetings to be at certain locations. We've talked about requiring them not to be at certain locations. There's always room for change and evolution of processes and practices, but we think we're getting closer and closer to something that works for the majority of the group and that is inclusive of everyone's needs to the best of our abilities. So, Sian, I talked a lot longer than 10:30. I got us almost to 11:15. I'll turn it over to you for our next agenda item for changes and updates for the ATF season.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. I'm sure that I will be much faster than you because I usually am. You always have this at the very tip of your frontal cortex, and I have to think of it a lot harder. I don't even know if that's the part of the brain, but you know what I mean. Okay. So the last thing I wanted to go over is the big reveal of the big change from this year. I think it was Alicia that had this request last year that we take a look at the ATF meeting report and that we make some changes. So I want to do a side-by-side comparison right now. I want to come over here to the ATF meeting links and I want to pull up the ATF chair links. And I want to just randomly choose. I'm going to choose the film and media, but I have to move you guys first. Give me a second so that I can get to that link. Well, actually, we're going to do mathematics because that's the only link I can get to because you guys are right in my way on my screen. So mathematics. Oh gosh, I'm going to have to. Here's the meeting agenda. I've got to find a way to, hold on.
That Zoom screen, like that bar, always gets in the way.
Yeah, so I'm going to make this bigger so we can kind of see this bigger window here. And now I'm going to come over to adding an ATF meeting report. And I'm going to find October 7th mathematics so we can match. Here we go. So we're going to add an ATF meeting report. If you notice, what we tried to do this year, this was an excellent suggestion from Alicia at our debrief last year, is to make this mimic this agenda. So all of this in the gray area that is the system assigns. We can check attendance just like we have before. The fall meeting information, this is actually at the end of your agenda, but because this is what we key into, we have this at the top of the meeting report. I want you to notice that we have changed this to a drop-down menu. So this next meeting location used to be an open field, and now it's a drop-down menu. And it's like Kelly already referenced earlier in the meeting that there are so many different campuses that it doesn't help me when the next meeting location is listed as ASU or the next meeting location is listed as Coconino Community College. Well, is it the 4th Street campus, the Page campus, or the Lone campus? So we now have this drop-down menu that you have to choose the campuses that it's at. If your campus isn't listed, then you choose other campus location, campus not listed, and you list it right here. You would then put in right here what the campus location is. And if one of those comes up, then we're going to find that PDF of the location and I'm going to add it to the drop-down menu and we're going to have that moving forward. So in a way, you guys are helping me collect this data. We've already been collecting it over the last couple of years. We think that this is a complete list. but there absolutely could be a surprise. Like I know ASU City Center isn't on here yet. So that would be an other type situation. Then we have this divided into, so we've got the next meeting chair. We request that you also include the institution that person is from and the host, and we hope that you will include the institution that that person is from. Then we've got the changes to the dashboard matrices, and this should follow right along with what we have on the agenda. It should actually be follow one to the next. So we've got the changes to the college course prefixes, the changes to the university course prefixes. You'll notice that that is number 4, university course prefixes. And I think that the Common Core or the CEG review is number 5. That is the community college matrices where you flip through and look at all of those prefixes on the CEG and make whatever changes needs to happen there. Then we've got changes to the Common Course matrices, the changes to the exam equivalency matrices. That's number 6 and 7. We've got any record of voting that needs to happen. And then the third category is the meeting wrap up. So we are asking you guys to highlight for us anything that the group would like AZTransfer to take a look at in the meantime, in the year between meetings, or if there's anything that needs to be highlighted or any agenda item that needs to come back onto the agenda for the next year. And who will be doing that work, who we follow up with, and anything specific to AZTransfer. So those are the big things. I also want to make sure that all of you are aware that this screen that I pulled up, this mathematics meeting agenda, and all of these agenda screens for all of the ATFs, these are all editable. If you edit them and save them here, then they are accessible from the dashboard. So are there any questions on this? I hope that this made sense. Kelly, do you have anything to add, or are there any questions? Nope. Okay. Alicia, that was a great suggestion. I hope that as you use this, you know, this is the first iteration. There might be things that you can tighten up or help us tighten up as you use it. I think users know where the changes need to be made and where the improvements need to be made. And so if you see some things that come up that are obvious that we're missing, please let me know. And then that's all I have. Kelly, do you want to address, so nobody has any questions on that, it sounds like. So Kelly, do you want to address anything that you're doing with the recording of the statewide update?
I wanted to wait until after the steering committee retreat. So this upcoming Sunday, June 12th through Tuesday, June 14th, we are having our first in-person steering committee meeting since February 2020. We are returning to a retreat model in the summer in Flagstaff. We haven't done that with the steering committee in several years. We have even more turnover at that level than we do the facilitators group. More than half of our steering committee is brand new within the last 18 months. And we have many things that we are discussing and voting on during that meeting. Some of them are operational things related to our budget and things related to my team. But some of them are statewide things like the AJEC redesign. Also, with the community college's ability to offer 4-year degrees, we have some questions that we are continuing to explore and discuss about 300 and 400 level classes and whether or not those will be included in our tools. And if they are, what that might look like. Establishment of new ATF groups, new communities of interest. And so I did not want to record the new statewide update prior to that meeting, knowing that some action items or some major decisions might come there. But I fully am prepared to record another 15 to 20 minute statewide update. I will try to talk as slowly as I possibly can. Speaking slowly is not my jam. But within YouTube, you can always slow it down or speed it up if you want to hear it faster. All of my audiobooks I play at 1.4 or 1.6. So I think my brain just is in hyper overdrive a lot. but I will have that available to you. I will do it in a YouTube format again, so you can just pull it from a public link and you can play it. We will put it in the virtual binder so that it's accessible so that you can find it. We do ask that you please play it for people, even if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, this is my 5th ATF meeting. I don't know if I can sit through Kelly's nasally voice and listen to her talk about the statewide update more than once. I get you, because when I go to the ATF meetings and I have to listen to my own nasally voice on the statewide update, I also don't present it myself. I play the audio recording. I find something else for myself to do during that time because I can't listen to my own voice. But especially with AJEC redesign, especially with some of the things that are coming down, we want to make sure that faculty statewide are getting a lot of the same information. I spent a considerable amount of time this spring working with and responding to faculty that were very concerned about AJEC things and saying that this was the first time they had ever heard of it. We've published it in the JLBC report. We've published it on our website. We've sent multiple emails out to people. It's been part of the ATF agendas. We've had it as meeting content on multiple things. And we want to make sure that that information is clear to folks. And if they're choosing not to read it, or if they're choosing not to engage in it, we've at least made the effort to get information out there. I don't have details right now on the AJEC redesign other than what has been emailed out and shared. I imagine, like most things, I think of AZTransfer. I think of Arizona as like a huge cruise ship in the desert, right? A cruise ship would be really, really nice. I think right now it would probably be infected with Giardia and all kinds of things. But if you think about a cruise ship making a hairpin turn, right? You see that big, huge iceberg ahead because we're on the Titanic. And we think about it having to turn. Cruise ships don't turn around, right? Like you have this tiny little angle that you adjust. And often that's the work that we have to do in Arizona with our institutions at AZTransfer. Think about how long it takes to accomplish something at your singular institution. Now multiply that by 14, because that's how many institutions we work with statewide. There is no single governing authority in Arizona. There's no higher ed commission that oversees all the universities, all the community colleges, the tribal colleges, everybody together. And AZTransfer is a service organization, is how I describe it. We provide a service to institutions. We are not an authority. We can't mandate or require that anybody do anything. We suggest, we leverage, we negotiate, we persuade. But a lot of what we have to get done requires active participation from everybody involved. And so, you know, AJEC redesign, the universities' gen eds have all been approved. Their general education changes have all been made. They're coming through in different implementation stages. That part's already been done. This AJEC redesign is the response to that, but it's also a bit socially responsible because this was conceived of almost 30 years ago. And this is matching 21st century skills. It's matching LEAP outcomes. It's not just a wild hair that I had or anybody on our steering committee had. It's matching a lot of trends nationally to look critically at general studies. So, you know, I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation or in a place, but you might want to prepare or have like a sentence or two that just says, you know, that's a great question about the AJEC. I'm going to write that down and I'll have Kelly get back to you. And that's an okay thing to say. You don't have to be the expert. You don't have to have all the answers. We just want you to be in the room. And then you can send me like the hate mail that people send you about the AJEC, because let me tell you, I get all kinds of hate mail from all your faculty, not all your faculty, some of your faculty. Some of it's love mail. Some of them are throwing me those crocheted F-bombs, but you know, I'm glad people feel comfortable enough voicing their concerns, and I'm glad they feel comfortable reaching out to me. But you know, it's going to come up anytime there's been anything that's relevant to faculty or to higher ed, because we convene people to talk about curriculum. We are one of the only places that we bring faculty together statewide. They are naturally going to talk about these things. We do not want to censor them. We do not want to tell them what to think or what to do. But we can say, I don't have the answer to that question, but I will write it down and I'll send it to AZTransfer and someone will be in touch with you. I'm always happy to be that scapegoat for you. Anything else, Cian, that I've missed that you wish I would or wouldn't have said?
There's only one more thing that I was going to throw out there, and that is about the statewide update. What I found last year in those recordings is people are, feel free to pause the recording. We don't need to have the statewide update recorded, that's already recorded another 43 times. So but you just have to remember to start the recording again. And so if you can be responsible and cut and stop the recording and then remember to start it again, then it will save a lot of time for the people who are going back and looking at the recording. As fascinating as that would be, they will have access to that statewide update from a YouTube link. It does not need to be embedded in the recording of the meeting. And the note takers do not need to take notes on the statewide update. So we don't need those in the meeting notes. They can take a break right then and just remember to start the recording again after the statewide update is over and start the note taking again. And that's all I have, Kelly. I just wanted to throw that in as well.
I think that's a really good point. I wouldn't have even thought about that. All right. Any questions you guys have for us? Anything you want to stay on with us about? Okay.
We'll stay on for a minute if anybody hangs back.
And Sienna and I were talking, I don't think we've identified the specific date yet, but it's usually the first Tuesday in December. We will maintain that as a virtual meeting. The facilitators group does typically meet twice a year. We mentioned yesterday that we are planning to return to in-person meetings for the summer for this facilitators group, but we will maintain a virtual meeting in December because we know that that's a busy time with end of semester wrap up and upcoming, winter and school breaks. And so we have that available. There is a question. Stacy said, you mentioned there should always be a virtual option at our ATF meetings. Does the same philosophy hold true for facilitator training and flag staff? No, it does not. For the training and the professional development, that does need to be done in person. So we do not have virtual options for the training meetings. All right. Sienna and I will stay on with you guys if you have any additional questions. Thank you for your time. Today, we gave you back a full hour. Go enjoy and live your best life on a Tuesday.